Did you know that in a libertarian society, no one forces anyone to do anything they don't want to? Intriguing, isn't it? Welcome to the enticing sphere of libertarianism, the philosophy that places individual freedom at its core. It's a realm where self-ownership and non-aggression aren't just concepts, they're the very principles that shape society. Now you might think, that sounds like pure anarchy, but let's investigate further. The libertarian philosophy is like a tree, rooted in two core principles. Imagine a tree. Its roots are its foundation, the source of its strength and sustenance. Similarly, the philosophy of libertarianism is grounded in two fundamental principles: self-ownership and non-aggression. Let's first look at self-ownership. This principle asserts that each individual has absolute dominion over their own body and life. It is a proclamation of personal sovereignty, a bold assertion of independence. Just as a king rules his kingdom, each one of us, according to libertarianism, is the monarch of our own life. Now, this doesn't mean we can do anything we like. Here's where the second principle comes into play, the non-aggression principle. This principle states that it is wrong to initiate force against another person or their property. In other words, your freedom ends where another person's begins. You can swing your arms around as much as you like, but the moment your fist connects with someone else's nose, you've crossed a line. These principles seem straightforward enough, don't they? But don't be fooled by their simplicity. These principles form the bedrock of the libertarian philosophy, guiding its approach to everything from economics to criminal justice. For instance, the principle of self-ownership underlies the libertarian emphasis on property rights and free markets. If you own yourself, then it follows that you own the fruits of your labor and have the right to trade them as you see fit. Similarly, the non-aggression principle informs the libertarian stance on government intervention. From this perspective, any attempt by the state to control or regulate individual behavior, unless it's to prevent harm to others, is seen as an unjustified infringement of personal liberty. These principles, though simple, have profound implications for how society would function. They challenge us to rethink our assumptions about the role of the state, the nature of rights, and the meaning of freedom. They invite us to imagine a world where each individual is the master of their own destiny, free to live their life as they see fit, as long as they respect the equal freedom of others. So brace yourself as we delve deeper into the intriguing world of libertarianism. Imagine a world where you have the ultimate freedom to make your own choices. This is the essence of libertarianism, a philosophy that champions individual liberty above all else. In a libertarian society, every person is the master of their own destiny. You're free to live your life as you see fit, as long as your actions don't infringe on the rights of others. This means the state takes a back seat, only stepping in to protect these rights and to ensure justice. Now, let's consider the economy in a libertarian society. Here, free markets reign supreme. Proponents of libertarianism argue that free markets are the most efficient way to distribute resources. Each person, acting in their own self-interest, contributes to a system where goods and services are produced based on demand, not dictated by a central authority. In this world, businesses rise and fall based on their ability to meet consumers' needs. Competition drives innovation, leading to better products, lower prices, and improved living standards over time. This is the power of voluntary exchange. It's the force that fuels economic growth in a libertarian society. But what about public goods and services, you may ask? In a libertarian society, these are provided through voluntary contributions and private initiatives, rather than compulsory taxation. For instance, community members might pool their resources to build a road or a school. This approach allows for more choice and flexibility, but also places a greater responsibility on individuals and communities. So what's the role of the state in all this? In a libertarian society, the state's role is minimal. Its primary function is to safeguard individual rights and to uphold the rule of law. It doesn't meddle in the economy, nor does it impose social norms or values. The state exists to serve the people, not to control them. In essence, libertarianism is about freedom, responsibility, and voluntary cooperation. It's about creating a society where individuals are free to pursue their own happiness, without interference from the state or others. It's a world where voluntary cooperation rules the day, not coercion. Of course, no philosophy is without its critics. And libertarianism, with its emphasis on individual liberty and minimal state intervention, is no exception. One of the most common critiques is the issue of wealth inequality. Detractors argue that in a society where the market is allowed to run its course without government intervention, the rich would get richer while the poor get poorer. This critique is rooted in the belief that without state intervention, wealth tends to concentrate in the hands of a few. And while it is true that libertarianism values individual freedom to amass wealth, it is also important to note that it strongly advocates for the freedom to create, innovate, and compete. It is this competition, libertarians argue, that drives innovation, reduces prices, and ultimately benefits everyone in society, not just the wealthy. Another critique leveled against libertarianism centers around public goods. These are goods that are non-excludable and non-rivalrous, meaning one person's use doesn't reduce its availability to others, and no one can be effectively excluded from using it. Think of a public park or national defense. Critics argue that without government, who would provide these goods? Libertarians counter this argument by pointing out that many public goods can and are provided by the private sector. They cite examples like private parks, private roads, and even private security firms. They argue that the market, if allowed to function freely, can provide these goods more efficiently and effectively than the government. And then there's the critique about the role of the state in protecting vulnerable citizens. Critics argue that without government intervention, those who are weak, poor, or disadvantaged could be left to fend for themselves. They point to social safety nets like welfare, unemployment benefits, and healthcare as examples of necessary government interventions. Libertarians, however, argue that voluntary cooperation and charity are more effective and humane ways to help those in need. They believe that individuals and communities, when given the freedom, are more than capable of looking after each other. They point to the numerous private charities and non-profit organizations that exist today as proof of this. In fact, some libertarians argue that government intervention often does more harm than good. They contend that welfare programs, for instance, can create dependency and discourage self-reliance. They argue for a society where individuals are given the freedom to succeed and the dignity to fail. At the end of the day, these critiques are important. They force us to critically examine the principles we hold dear and to constantly seek better ways to implement them. And for libertarians, these critiques are not seen as fatal flaws, but as challenges to be solved through innovation and voluntary cooperation. As the saying goes, necessity is the mother of invention. And in a libertarian society, the freedom to innovate and cooperate is held in the highest regard. So, while libertarianism may have its critics, it is not without its defenses. Libertarians see these critiques not as fatal flaws, but as challenges to be solved through innovation and voluntary cooperation. Libertarianism isn't just an abstract philosophy, it's a living, breathing movement. Today, the principles of libertarianism echo through the corridors of power and ripple across the fabric of society. The influence of this philosophy is not confined within the boundaries of academia, but plays out on the global stage, affecting the lives of millions. Prominent figures who openly identify as libertarians are making waves in various fields, from politics and economics to technology and entertainment. One such figure is former U.S. Congressman Ron Paul, whose presidential campaigns in 2008 and 2012 highlighted libertarian principles to a wider audience. His son, Rand Paul, continues to uphold the libertarian banner in the U.S. Senate. In the realm of technology, the libertarian ethos of individual freedom and minimal government interference is embodied by innovators like Peter Thiel, co-founder of PayPal. Thiel's advocacy for entrepreneurial autonomy reflects the libertarian belief in the power of individual creativity, unhindered by excessive regulation. Across the pond, in the United Kingdom, Mark Littlewood, the Director General of the Institute of Economic Affairs, is a leading voice in libertarian thought. His work focuses on promoting free market principles, a cornerstone of libertarianism. But it's not just individuals making a difference. Libertarianism has influenced entire political parties. The Libertarian Party in the United States, despite its relatively small size, has had a significant impact on political dialogue, pushing issues like drug decriminalization and non-interventionist foreign policy into mainstream discussion. In society at large, the influence of libertarianism is perhaps more subtle but no less significant. The rise of the sharing economy, championed by companies like Uber and Airbnb, reflects a libertarian ethos of free exchange and voluntary cooperation. And so, as we navigate this complex and ever-changing world, we find that the principles of libertarianism serve as both a compass and a challenge, prompting us to question the status quo and seek alternatives that prioritize individual liberty and personal responsibility. Libertarianism continues to shape our world in surprising ways. So, why are people drawn to libertarianism? Let's ponder this question for a moment. At its core, libertarianism is an ideology that champions individual freedom. It's an enticing prospect, isn't it? The idea that you, as an individual, have the power to shape your own destiny, free from overbearing regulations or interference from the government. There's a certain allure to this simplicity, a kind of elegance in its consistency, a consistent philosophy that says, you are free to do as you please, as long as you don't infringe on the rights of others. It's like a breath of fresh air in a world filled with complex and often contradictory rules. But the appeal of libertarianism goes beyond just the desire for freedom. There's also a sense of dissatisfaction with the current political systems. It's no secret that many are disillusioned with the status quo. They feel that their voices are not being heard, that their freedoms are being eroded. And in the face of such frustration, libertarianism presents itself as an alternative, a way to regain control. It's not just about being against something, though. Libertarianism also offers a positive vision of what society could look like. It paints a picture of a world in which individuals are free to pursue their own interests, to innovate, to create. A world in which voluntary cooperation and mutual respect are the norm rather than the exception. Of course, it's not for everyone. Like any philosophy, libertarianism has its critics, but for those who value individual freedom above all else, who yearn for a less complicated and more transparent system, the appeal is undeniable. The appeal of libertarianism, then, lies in its affirmation of individual freedom, its dissatisfaction with current political systems, and its vision of a simpler, more consistent society. It's an ideology that resonates with those who yearn for self-determination and who believe in the power of the individual. For many, libertarianism offers a vision of a freer, fairer world. So we've journeyed through the world of libertarianism, from its core principles to its critiques and its influence today. A philosophical voyage that has proven to be both enlightening and thought-provoking. In these past few minutes, we've delved into the heart of a philosophy that champions the individual, freedom, and voluntary cooperation. Let's take a moment to reflect on what we've learned. We began by immersing ourselves in the enticing world of libertarianism, a philosophy that places the individual at its very center. It argues for a society where each person is free to make their own choices, to live their lives as they see fit, so long as they do not infringe upon the rights of others. Then we explored the core principles that underpin this philosophy. We learned about the non-aggression principle, the belief in private property rights and the free market, and the idea that voluntary cooperation is the best way for individuals to interact with each other. Next, we looked at libertarianism in action, examining various instances where these principles have been applied. We saw how these ideas could influence various aspects of society, from the economy to social issues. We then turned our attention to the critiques of libertarianism, examining the counter-arguments presented by those who question its practicality and ethical implications. We learned that, like all philosophies, libertarianism is not without its challenges and criticisms. And finally, we discussed the influence of libertarianism in today's world. We saw how this philosophy continues to shape debates on a wide range of issues, from economic policy to civil liberties. Throughout this journey, we've reinforced the idea that libertarianism is a philosophy of freedom and voluntary cooperation. It offers a vision of a society in which the individual is sovereign and interactions are based on mutual consent rather than coercion. Whether you agree with it or not, there's no denying that libertarianism offers a unique and compelling vision of society. It invites us to question our assumptions about the role of the state, the nature of freedom, and the best way to achieve a just and prosperous society. We've only scratched the surface of libertarianism today. There is so much more to uncover, so many layers to peel back. This philosophy, like all others, is a rich tapestry of ideas that can help shape your own perspectives. It's a fascinating endeavor, one that promises to enlighten and challenge you. So keep probing, keep questioning. If you found this video helpful and informative, show your support by hitting the like button and subscribing to our channel. See you in the next video.